I smelled the rotting flesh before I even opened my 7-year-old son's bedroom door. It wasn't the smell of a fever or a flu, it was the smell of a battlefield. I pulled back his blankets, my hands shaking for the first time in 20 years of combat. I lifted his pajama shirt and my heart stopped. There on his lower back was a jagged, angry incision stitched together with black thread like a zipper on a cheap suit. My son hadn't just been sick while I was deployed, someone had cut him open. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The silence in my house was heavier than body armor. After 10 months in the sandbox, classified ops in regions I couldn't name on a map, coming home was supposed to be the easy part. I was Hunter, the billionaire defense contractor who spent more time in the mud with his men than in the boardroom. I had flown back on my private jet, skipping the debriefing, skipping the accolades just to surprise them. My wife Morgan, my son, Evan. I expected noise. I expected Evan's laughter, the sound of cartoons blasting from the living room, the smell of Morgan's vanilla candles. Instead, the mansion was a tomb. The air conditioning hummed, cold and sterile, circulating air that tasted metallic. "Morgan!" I called out, dropping my duffel bag in the marble foyer. The echo was lonely. No answer. A pit formed in my stomach. It was the same instinct that tingled at the base of my neck right before an ambush. Something was wrong. The furniture was perfect, the floors were polished, but the energy was terrified. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heading straight for Evan's room. The hallway was dark, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. As I approached his door, that smell hit me. It was faint, masked by air freshener, but unmistakable to a man who had spent half his life patching up soldiers in the field. "Betadine, old blood infection." I pushed the door open. "Evan," I whispered. My boy was lying in the center of his bed, looking small and fragile against the oversized pillows. His skin was the color of parchment paper, gray and translucent. Sweat matted his blonde hair to his forehead. He was sleeping, but it wasn't a peaceful sleep. It was the heavy chemical sleep of sedation. I moved to his side, my boots silent on the carpet. "Buddy, Daddy's home." He didn't stir, his breathing was shallow, raspy, like there was fluid in his lungs. I reached out to touch his forehead, burning hot, a fever spike. My eyes traveled down. He was wearing his favorite superhero pajamas, but the shirt was twisted, bunched up around his waist. I saw the staining first, a yellowish-brown spot on the sheet. Then I saw the gauze peeking out from the waistband. Confused, I gently pulled the shirt up. The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. The incision was about 4 inches long, located just above his right hip, near the kidney. It wasn't clean. It wasn't the work of a laser or a precision scalpel found in the top-tier hospitals I paid millions to insure my family with. The skin around the wound was angry, red, and swollen tight. The stitches were uneven, pulling the skin so tight it looked like it might tear. This was a butcher job. "Hunter," the voice came from the doorway. I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm. I had already checked into the safe downstairs. Morgan stood there. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair messy, her eyes wide and bloodshot. She didn't look like the confident, glowing socialite I had left 10 months ago. She looked like a ghost. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in weeks. "What is this?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. I pointed to our son's back. Morgan flinched. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears instantly welling up. "Oh God, Hunter, you weren't supposed to see him like this. You weren't supposed to be home until Friday. I asked you a question." I stepped toward her, the soldier taking over the husband. "Who cut our son?" She rushed forward, grabbing my arm, trying to pull me away from the bed. "It was an accident. A freak accident at the park 2 weeks ago. He fell from the jungle gym. He landed on a metal spike. It ruptured his kidney. Hunter, it was awful. There was so much blood." I looked back at the wound. I've seen trauma wounds. I've seen shrapnel tears and knife punctures. That scar was surgical. It was an incision, not a tear. "He fell on a spike," I repeated, testing her lie. "So, you took him to St. Jude's. You called the specialist I have on retainer." Morgan's eyes darted to the side. "No, there wasn't time. He was bleeding out in the car. I took him to the nearest clinic. Dr. Julian saved him. He saved his life. Hunter, you should be grateful. Dr. Julian." The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. A local doctor? A strip mall physician? Why is he here? I gestured to the room. If he had a ruptured kidney repair, he should be in the ICU. He should be on monitors. He looked septic. Morgan. Dr. Julian said he recovers better at home, she said quickly, too quickly. She was trembling. Hoss are full of germs. We have a private nurse coming in. Please, Hunter, keep your voice down, you'll wake him. I looked at Evan again. He wasn't waking up for anything short of an adrenaline shot. He was deeply sedated. I'm calling an ambulance, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm moving him to the military hospital at the base. They have the best renal specialists in the country, Morgan screamed. It wasn't a protest, it was a shriek of pure panic. She threw herself at me, clawing at my phone. No, you can't. Dr. Julian said he can't be moved. The stitches are too delicate. If you move him, he'll bleed internally. You'll kill him, Hunter. Do you want to kill your son? I froze. Her reaction was visceral, terrified. But was she terrified for Evan or of something else? I lowered the phone slowly. I needed to assess the situation. I was in enemy territory. I just didn't know the layout yet. If she was telling the truth, however unlikely, moving him could be dangerous. I needed intel first. Okay, I said, putting my hands up in a surrender motion. Okay, calm down. Morgan collapsed against my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I'm just so scared. It's been a nightmare. I handled it alone, Hunter. I handled it all while you were playing soldier. I held her, stroking her hair, but my eyes remained open, staring over her shoulder at my son's broken body. I felt no warmth from her. I felt only vibration, the vibration of a liar. I soothed her, my voice flat. It's okay. I'm here now. I let her cry for a minute, waiting for her breathing to even out. Why don't you go wash your face? I'll sit with him. I won't move him. She pulled back, sniffing, wiping her eyes. She looked relieved. Too relieved. Okay. I need a shower. I'll be right back. Don't touch the bandages. Okay, Dr. Julian is very specific about the dressing. I won't touch a thing. I lied. She nodded, gave me a weak, trembling smile and hurried out of the room. As soon as her footsteps faded down the hall, the mask dropped from my face. I didn't sit in the chair. I went to work. I moved to the bedside table. It was cluttered with orange prescription bottles. I picked one up. Oxycodone, high dose for a 7-year-old. I picked up another cyclosporin. My blood ran cold. I knew what cyclosporin was. It wasn't a painkiller. It wasn't an antibiotic for an infection from a fall. It was an immunosuppressant. It was the drug you gave to patients to stop their bodies from rejecting a new organ, to stop their bodies from going into shock after losing one. You didn't fall, did you, buddy? I whispered to Evan. I needed to see the chart. I needed to see the medical records. But first, I needed to know who this Dr. Julian really was. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the scar, but the battery icon flashed red. Dead. I cursed silently. I looked around the room for a charger. I saw Morgan's phone sitting on the dresser, plugged into the wall. She must have forgotten it in her panic. I walked over and tapped the screen. It was locked, but I knew her passcode. It was our anniversary, or at least it used to be. I typed in 4. The phone unlocked. I wasn't proud of snooping, but the soldier in me knew that information was ammunition. I opened her messages. The most recent thread was pinned at the top. The contact name was just J. My thumb hovered over the message. I opened it. The last text was sent 3 minutes ago, while she was hugging me while she was crying on my chest. Morgan, he's home early. He saw the cut. I told him the cover story about the fall. I felt a cold rage spread through my veins, freezing me in place. Then 3 dots bubbled up. The reply came in instantly. Jay, did the soldier boy buy it? Make sure he doesn't take the kid to a real doctor. If he sees an X-ray, we're both dead. Keep him sedated if you have to. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening until the glass protector cracked under my thumb. They weren't healing my son, they were hiding evidence. The crack on Morgan's phone screen spiderwebbed under my thumb, a perfect mirror of the fracture running through my life. If he sees an X-ray, we're both dead. I carefully placed the phone back on the dresser exactly as I found it. My training kicked in, compartmentalized the rage. If I exploded now, I'd lose the element of surprise. I needed to know exactly how deep this rot went. I heard the shower running down the hall. I had maybe 10 minutes. I moved back to Evan's side. I needed to check his vitals myself. I pressed 2 fingers to his carotid artery. His pulse was thready and fast. Too fast. He wasn't just recovering, his body was fighting a war. I lifted his eyelids gently. His pupils were pinpricks, heavy narcotics. They were keeping him under so he couldn't talk, so he couldn't tell his daddy what really happened. I leaned down and kissed his sweaty forehead. "I've got you now, soldier," I whispered. "Hold the line." I slipped out of the room and went downstairs to my office. I needed access to my secure servers. I sat at my mahogany desk and tried to log into our joint bank accounts. Access denied. Password changed. I tried the backup security questions. Changed. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Morgan wasn't tech-savvy. She could barely reset the Wi-Fi router. Someone else had locked me out of my own life. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a tentative ring. It was a confident two-note chime. I glanced at the security monitor. A man stood on the porch, tall, slick-back hair, wearing a tailored Italian suit that cost more than a staff sergeant's yearly salary. He held a black medical bag. "Dr. Julian," I recognized the arrogance in his posture instantly. I opened the front door. "Mr. Advance," he said smoothly, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Dr. Julian. Morgan texted me that you'd returned early. A surprise for all of us." I didn't shake his hand. I just stared at it until he awkwardly retracted it. "You're the one treating my son." "Treating him? I saved him," Julian corrected, stepping past me into the foyer without an invitation. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale tobacco. "The injury was severe. Most doctors would have lost him on the table, but I specialize in complex trauma. Is that right?" I closed the door, locking it. The click echoed loudly. Morgan said he fell on a spike. Strange that a fall would require immunosuppressants. Julian didn't flinch. He was good. A sociopath, maybe. Standard protocol to prevent infection rejection from foreign debris. Rust. Dirt. We have to suppress the immune response so the tissue heals without inflammation. It's advanced medicine. Mr. Vance, you might not be familiar with it in the field. He said field like it was a dirty word, like I was a grunt digging ditches while he was God. "I'm familiar with a lot of things," I said, following him as he walked toward the stairs. "Like the fact that my son is sedated to the point of a coma. Rest is the best medicine," Julian said dismissively over his shoulder. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to change his dressing. It's a delicate procedure. I prefer if you waited down here. Fathers tend to get squeamish around open wounds. I've stitched up my own leg in a ditch in Afghanistan. Doctor, I think I can handle a bandage change." Julian stopped on the third step. He turned slowly, looking down at me. His eyes were cold. Dead sharks swimming in blue water. "And I am the medical professional here. My patient's stress levels need to remain low. Your energy, it's aggressive. It will upset him. Wait downstairs." That is not a request. It was a power play. He was testing my dominance in my own house. Before I could respond, Morgan appeared at the top of the stairs. She was dressed now, hair wet, wearing a tight sweater and jeans. She looked between us, sensing the violence hanging in the air. "Hunter, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Let Julian do his job. Just go make some coffee, please, for Evan." I looked at her. Really? Looked at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Julian. There was a look passed between them, a mixture of fear and intimacy, a look that said, "Handle him." I forced a tight smile. "Fine, I'll be in the kitchen." I turned and walked away. I heard them exhale. I heard their footsteps continue up to Evan's room. I heard the door click shut. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to the library, directly beneath Evan's room. I walked to the far bookshelf and pulled out a copy of The Art of War. Behind it was a hidden panel. I punched in a code only I knew. The panel slid open to reveal a wall safe. I spun the dial. Left 40, right 10, left 25. The heavy steel door swung open. I wasn't looking for a gun, not yet. I was looking for the emergency cash reserve. I always kept $100,000 in cash bundles for extraction scenarios. If we ever had to run, this was our lifeline. The safe was empty. Dust motes danced in the empty steel box. The stacks of hundreds were gone. I felt around the back of the safe. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper that had slipped behind the metal shelf. I pulled it out. It was a crumpled receipt hastily shoved in the back, likely by someone grabbing the cash in a hurry. It wasn't a bank deposit slip. It was a receipt from a private medical courier service called Biotransit Solutions. Item, biological waste disposal, 30 pounds. Fee $2,500. Date, October 14th. October 14th, that was 3 days ago, the day of the surgery. My mind raced. Biological waste. 30 pounds. A kidney doesn't weigh 30 pounds. But the bloody linens, the contaminated tools, the evidence of an off-the-book surgery performed in a non-sterile environment that would weigh about 30 pounds. They didn't do this at a clinic. They did this here. My stomach churned. The smell in Evan's room. The antiseptic masking the old blood. They had cut my son open in his own bedroom. They had turned his sanctuary into a slaughterhouse. And the $100,000 that was likely the down payment for silence, or a debt payment. I heard footsteps above me, heavy pacing, muffled voices. I needed to hear what they were saying. I didn't have my tactical listening gear. It was still in my deployment bag in the foyer, but I knew this house better than anyone. I had built it. I walked to the ornate fireplace. The ventilation shaft for the HVAC system ran straight up through the master bedroom and Evan's room. I silently unlatched the vent cover and stuck my head in, straining to listen. The sound traveled down the metal tin like a microphone. "He's asking too many questions, Julian." Morgan's voice hissed, distorted, but clear. He touched the bandage. "He knows it's not a fall. Calm down." Julian's voice was smooth, arrogant. "He's a soldier. He sees danger everywhere. He's paranoid. We just need to keep the boy under for another 48 hours until the buyer transfer clears. Once the money is in the Cayman account, we can take the boy to a real hospital and claim complications set in." "But the other kidney," Morgan sounded sick. "You said the remaining one was fine." "He hasn't peed in 12 hours, Julian. He's swelling up." My heart hammered against my ribs. "The remaining one. It's just shock," Julian snapped. "Stop whining. Do you want the senator to come after us? We delivered the goods. We got the 50 grand advance and the rest is coming. You spent that 50 grand covering your credit card debt. Morgan, you're in this as deep as I am. If I go down, you go down as the mother who held the retractor." I pulled my head out of the vent. I felt like I was going to vomit. She held the retractor. My wife, the woman who gave birth to him, she helped this butcher carve our son apart to pay off credit card debt. The rage that filled me wasn't hot anymore. It was absolute zero. It was the cold, calculating focus of a sniper adjusting for windage. I stood up and brushed the soot off my shoulder. I checked my watch. 1600 hours. They thought they were dealing with a husband. They thought they were dealing with a worried father they could manipulate. They had no idea they had just declared war on a Tier 1 operator. I walked to the foyer, picked up my duffel bag, and slung it over my shoulder. I walked back to the bottom of the stairs and shouted up, making my voice sound defeated and tired. "Morgan, I'm going to head to the base to check in. I need to file some paperwork for my return. I'll stay at the officers' quarters tonight so I don't disturb Evan." I waited. The bedroom door opened. Morgan stepped out, relief washing over her face like a tidal wave. "Oh, okay, Hunter, that's probably best. He really needs the quiet." "Take care of him," I said. "I will, I promise," she lied. I walked out the front door and closed it behind me. I walked to my truck, threw my bag in the back, and started the engine. I drove down the long driveway, watching the house in my rearview mirror, a beautiful, perfect lie. I didn't turn toward the base. I drove 2 blocks over, pulled into a dense patch of woods that overlooked the rear of my property, and killed the engine. I opened my duffel bag. I pushed aside the dirty laundry and pulled out the hard case at the bottom. I snapped the latches open. Inside lay my tech kit, signal jammers, long-range parabolic microphone, thermal imaging monocular, and a laptop loaded with military-grade decryption software. "Protocol Ghost," I muttered to myself. I wasn't leaving. I was digging in, and I wasn't going to stop until I knew exactly who bought my son's kidney, and exactly how I was going to make them pay for every single ounce of flesh they stole. I sat in the darkness of the treeing, the engine of my truck cooling in the silence. Through the thermal monocular, my house glowed in shades of blue and orange. The master bedroom was bright red, body heat. 2 figures, Morgan and Julian. They were close together, merging into one blob of heat before separating. They were celebrating. My grip on the monocular tightened until the plastic creaked. Inside that house, my son was lying in his own filth, his body fighting to survive a mutilation funded by his mother's greed, and they were likely popping champagne. I set the monocular down and opened the laptop. The screen's blue light illuminated the cab of the truck, casting long shadows across my face. I didn't look like a billionaire now. I looked like what I was, a hunter in a blind, waiting for the prey to step into the crosshairs. "Time to see what you're hiding, Julian," I whispered. I didn't just have skills, I had access. My defense contracting firm, Aegis Systems, didn't just build drones. We built the cybersecurity nets for half the Pentagon. I typed in a command line that would bypass the local residential firewall of my home network. It took 3 seconds. I was in. I mirrored Morgan's phone first. It was almost too easy. She was still connected to the Wi-Fi. I watched her screen in real time on my laptop. She was scrolling through a jewelry website, looking at a diamond tennis bracelet priced at $12,000. Spending the blood money already, I muttered, feeling bile rise in my throat. But Morgan was just the accomplice. I needed the architect. I turned my attention to Julian. I scanned the network for other devices. iPhone 15 Pro guest network. That was him. I deployed a packet sniffer, a piece of code that intercepts data traffic. It wasn't instant access like in the movies. I had to wait for him to send or receive data. 5 minutes past 10, then a ping, an email notification. I intercepted the packet before it even hit his inbox. I decrypted the header. It was from an encrypted server, a Proton Mail account. The subject line was blank. I opened the attachment. It was a PDF, a medical invoice, but not a legal one. It was stamped with a logo I didn't recognize. Escipius Holdings. Item renal allograft left donor ID, M07 minor viability grade A. Price $200,000. Broker fee, $25,000. Net to surgeon, $175,000. My breath hitched, $200,000. They sold my son for the price of a luxury car, but the buyer's name wasn't on the invoice. Just a code client. Senator, for Senator. The word hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't just black market, this was elite corruption. Someone with power, someone who could make legal problems disappear. That explained why Julian was so confident. He had protection from the highest levels of government. I needed a name. I switched tactics. I couldn't hack a Proton Mail server easily, but I could hack Julian's browser history. Men like him were arrogant. They got sloppy. I pulled up his search history from the last week. Online gambling debts forgiveness. Flights to Cayman's non-extradition. Suppression of sepsis in pediatric patients. My heart stopped. Sepsis. He knew Evan was going septic. He knew the infection was spreading into his blood and he wasn't treating it. He was suppressing the symptoms to hide the botched surgery until the money cleared. You're killing him, I said, my voice shaking. You're actively killing him. I couldn't wait anymore. Protocol Ghost was about gathering intel, but the mission parameters had just changed. This was now a rescue op. I reached into the back seat and grabbed a sleek black case. I cracked it open to reveal a suppressed Sig Sauer P226 and a set of lockpicks. I holstered the weapon, not to use it yet, but because I felt naked without it. I closed the laptop but left it running, recording everything. I slipped out of the truck, moving like a shadow through the trees. The leaves were damp, silencing my footsteps. I approached the back of the house, avoiding the security cameras I had installed myself. I knew the blind spots. I reached the back patio door. I peered through the glass. The kitchen was empty. A half-empty bottle of Dom Perignon sat on the island next to a pizza box. The contrast was grotesque. Luxury wine and takeout while my son rotted upstairs. I didn't break the glass. I used a specialized magnetic tool to slide the internal latch. The door opened with a soft click. I was inside. I moved through the living room, my breathing shallow and controlled. I could hear voices coming from the den. Don't worry about the soldier, Julian was saying. His voice was slurred. Drunk. He's probably crying in his bunk at the base right now. He's weak, Morgan. He has money, sure, but he doesn't have the stomach for reality. He loves Evan, Morgan said. Her voice sounded small. If he finds out, he won't, Julian snapped. Unless you crack. Do you want to go to prison, Morgan? Do you want to wear an orange jumpsuit? Because that's what happens if you open your mouth. You helped. You signed the consent form forged. You're the legal guardian. I paused in the hallway, my hand hovering over my holster. The urge to kick down the door and put a bullet in his knee was overwhelming. But a dead man couldn't tell me where my son's kidney was, and a dead man couldn't lead me to the senator. I needed them alive for now. I crept past the den and up the stairs. The third step always creaked. I skipped it. I reached Evan's door. I turned the handle slowly. Locked. Of course, they locked him in like an animal. I pulled a tension wrench from my pocket. 2 seconds later, the lock turned. I slipped inside. The smell was worse now. It was heavier, sweeter, the smell of decay. I moved to the bed. Evan was soaked in sweat. He was shivering violently despite the heavy blankets. Evan, I whispered, putting my hand on his cheek. He was burning up. 104, maybe 105 degrees. His eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. He looked at me, but I wasn't sure he saw me. "Daddy," he croaked. His voice was a dry rattle. "I'm here, buddy," I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm here, my back hurts," he whimpered. A single tear leaked from his eye. The bad man, he hurt my back. "I know," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "I know he did, but I'm going to fix it." I scooped him up. He was light, too light. He had lost weight in just 10 months. He groaned in pain as I lifted him, his head lolling against my chest. I wrapped him in the blanket, covering his face. I had to get him out, now. I moved to the window. It was a second-story drop, but there was a trellis covered in ivy that ran down the side of the house. I had climbed it 100 times to sneak out when I was a teenager living in this very house. I opened the window. The night air rushed in, cool and clean compared to the sickness inside. I swung one leg over the sill, holding Evan tight to my chest with one arm. Suddenly, the bedroom door handle rattled. "Evan," it was Morgan's voice. I heard a noise. "Are you awake?" I froze. The lock clicked. She was using a key. I didn't have time to climb down. I stepped back into the shadows of the heavy velvet drapes just as the door swung open. Light from the hallway flooded the room. Morgan stepped in. She looked at the empty bed. She looked at the open window. "Julian," she screamed. "He's gone." I didn't wait. I kicked the window screen out. It clattered onto the roof below and vaulted over the sill, clutching my son. I slid down the trellis, tearing the vines, hitting the grass with a heavy thud. I absorbed the impact with my knees, shielding Evan. "Hey!" Julian's voice shouted from above. I looked up to see him leaning out the window, a silhouette against the light. He was holding something. A gun? No, a phone. He was calling someone. "Run," I told myself. I sprinted toward the woods, the darkness swallowing us whole. I didn't run to my truck. That was the first place they would look. I ran deeper into the forest, toward the old hunting cabin 3 miles east. My son was burning up in my arms. "Hang on, Evan," I panted, my boots pounding the earth. "Daddy's got you. Daddy's got you." Behind me, I heard the roar of an engine. Julian's Porsche. He was coming for us. And I knew with a sickening certainty that he wasn't coming to check on his patient. He was coming to bury his mistake. The woods were a labyrinth of shadows and snapping branches. I ran until my lungs burned. My son's dead weight pressing against my chest like a shield. Behind us, the high-pitched whine of Julian's Porsche engine cut through the night, searching the road that ran parallel to the forest line. He was hunting us, but he was hunting from the asphalt. I was in the dirt. This was my terrain. "Daddy!" "Cold," Evan murmured, his teeth chattering against my collarbone. "I know, buddy. I know," I whispered, adjusting my grip. His fever was radiating through my tactical vest. Every minute without real medical attention was a minute closer to irreversible organ failure. I reached the hunting cabin 20 minutes later. It wasn't much, a relic from my grandfather's time, but it had 4 walls, a roof, and no digital footprint. I kicked the door open, the rusty hinges screeching in protest. I laid Evan on the dusty cot. He whimpered, but didn't wake. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar of signal. Enough. I didn't call 911. 911 would alert the local police. And for all I knew, the senator owned them too. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. "Dr. Kendra, secure line," I said the moment the call connected. "Hunter." Her voice was sharp. "Alert. It's 3 a.m. This better be a catastrophe." "It is. I have a 7-year-old male, critical condition, post-op complications from a black market nephrectomy, sepsis setting in. I need a sterile site and I need it off the grid." Now there was a pause, a heavy silence. Kendra was the best combat surgeon I had ever worked with. She didn't ask stupid questions. "My private clinic in the city is compromised with cameras," she said, her voice shifting into command mode. "Bring him to the boathouse. You know where it is. I'll meet you in 40 minutes, with a full trauma kit and portable imaging." 40 minutes, I repeated. "I'm moving." I hung up. The boathouse was an old safe house our unit used for debriefings located on the edge of the industrial docks. It was 40 miles away. I couldn't use my truck. Julian would be watching the main roads. I needed a ghost ride. I ran to the back of the cabin, where an old tarp covered his shape. I pulled it off. My teenage dirt bike, a Yamaha 250, dusty, rusted, but mechanical. No GPS, no tracking. I hot-wired it in 30 seconds. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life, spitting blue smoke. I used a bungee cord to secure Evan to my chest, facing me, his head tucked under my chin. "Hold on tight, soldier," I said. I tore out of the woods, bypassing the main road and hitting the logging trails. I rode like a man possessed, the wind whipping past us, the vibration of the bike rattling my bones. 45 minutes later, I skidded to a halt inside the rusted corrugated metal of the boathouse. Kendra was already there. She had set up a mobile tree of unit on a stainless steel table under a singular bright halogen light. She was scrubbed in, gloves on, mask up. "Table," she ordered, not wasting a second on greetings. I unstrapped Evan and laid him down. Under the harsh light, he looked even worse. His skin was gray-green, the veins in his neck were distended. Kendra cut his pajamas off with trauma shears. She hissed when she saw the incision. "Jesus, Hunter, who did this?" "A vet. A cosmetic surgeon named Julian," I spat, pacing the concrete floor. "He told my wife it was a fall." Kendra palpated the stomach. Rigid abdomen, peritonitis. The internal stitches leaked. She grabbed a portable ultrasound probe and slathered gel on Evan's stomach. We both watched the small black and white screen. There, Kendra pointed to a dark fluid-filled pocket. Abscess. Massive infection around the renal artery stump. She moved the probe to the other side, and here she stopped. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. "What?" I stepped closer. "What is it, Hunter?" Kendra looked at me, her eyes wide over her mask. "Look at the left kidney." I looked at the screen. I saw the outline of the organ, but it looked wrong. It was small, shriveled. Is that damage?" I asked. "That's atrophic," Kendra said, her voice cold. "It's failing, Hunter. They didn't just take a healthy kidney, they took the good one, the one they left behind. It has congenital scarring. It's barely functioning at 20%. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "They left him with the bad one," I whispered. "They didn't check," Kendra said, her anger matching mine. "They didn't do a pre-op scan. They just went in, grabbed the first kidney they could reach, and cashed out. They left him with a ticking time bomb. If we don't get him on dialysis within hours, he's going to die of uremic poisoning." Dialysis. My 7-year-old son needed dialysis because his mother wanted to pay off credit cards and her boyfriend wanted to pay a bookie. "Can you stabilize him?" I asked, my voice sounding like gravel. "I can drain the abscess. I can pump him full of broad-spectrum antibiotics, but I can't replace a kidney here. He needs a transplant, Hunter. He needs a donor soon." "Do it," I said. "Fix the leak. Keep him alive. I'll get the kidney." Kendra looked up, scalpel in hand. "You can't just get a kidney, Hunter. The wait list is yours." I walked to the metal door of the boathouse, checking the lock. I turned back to her, my face a mask of shadow. "I'm not going to the list," I said. "I know where his kidney is, and I'm going to go get it back." "It's not a wallet, Hunter," Kendra snapped. "It's an organ. If it's been transplanted, you can't just take it back." "It hasn't been transplanted yet," I said, remembering the invoice. "Viability grade A, buyer Senator 4. The invoice didn't have a surgery date, it had a delivery date tomorrow. The buyer takes delivery tomorrow," I said, checking my watch. "It's probably in a cooler right now, waiting for transport." Kendra stared at me. She saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man who had crossed a moral event horizon. She nodded once, turning back to Evan. "I need 2 hours to clean this mess up. After that, he can be moved." "But Hunter, if you go after them, they drew first blood," I said, unlocking the door. "I'm just finishing the mission." I stepped out into the cool night air of the docks. The smell of salt and diesel filled my nose. My phone vibrated. A text message. It was from Morgan. "Morgan, please. Hunter, bring him back. Julian is calling the police. He's going to say you kidnapped him. He's going to say you're having a PTSD episode and you're dangerous. They'll shoot you on sight." I stared at the screen. She was doubling down. She was going to frame me to save herself. She was going to use my service, my trauma, my sacrifices against me. I typed a reply, "Hunter, let them come, but tell Julian to keep his phone on. I'm sending him a picture." I took a photo of the ultrasound screen, the image of the shriveled, failing kidney they had left inside my son. I hit send, then I typed one more message. "Hunter, you didn't check the other one, did you? You left him to die. The deal is off, Morgan, and the repo man is coming." I pocketed the phone. I walked to the edge of the water and looked at my reflection. I didn't see a father anymore, I saw a weapon. I needed resources. I needed a team, but most of all, I needed to buy the battlefield. I pulled out my satellite phone, the one connected directly to my offshore accounts. I dialed my banker in Zurich. Herr Vance, the voice was sleepy. It is 4 a.m. Wake up, I said. I need you to authorize a hostile takeover. I want to buy a controlling interest in St. Mary's private hospital. The hospital? The banker sounded confused. That will cost hundreds of millions. It will take weeks. I don't have weeks. I have hours. Offer them double the market cap cash. I want my name on the deed by sunrise. But why? Because I said, watching the sun begin to bleed into the horizon. I need to schedule a surgery, and I want to make sure the doctor can't leave the building. Sunrise broke over the city like a bruise, purple and yellow and angry. I sat in the back of an unmarked black SUV, watching the entrance of St. Mary's private hospital. My banker in Zurich had worked miracles, or rather money had. The board of directors had woken up to an offer they couldn't refuse. By 8 a.m., the paperwork was filed. Technically, I now owned the ground Dr. Julian walked on, but ownership wasn't enough. I needed control. My phone buzzed. It was a secure ping from my private investigator, a former NSA analyst named Ghost. I had tasked him with finding the identity of Senator 4. File received. Senator Marcus Thorne, chairman of the Health Oversight Committee, gambling addict, owes $3 million to the cartels, diagnosis, end-stage renal failure. It all clicked. Thorne was using his political power to bypass the transplant list. Julian was the supplier. My son was the raw material. I looked at the photo of Senator Thorne attached to the file. A smiling man in a suit shaking hands with babies. A man who would strip a 7-year-old for parts to save his own miserable hide. You picked the wrong donor, Marcus, I whispered. I needed to separate the pack. If I went after them all at once, they'd circle the wagons. I needed to isolate them. I dialed Morgan's number. She picked up on the first ring. Hunter, oh God, Hunter, where are you? The police are here. They're looking for you. Her voice was high, frantic. An Oscar-worthy performance for the officers likely standing right next to her. Put me on speaker, I said calmly. I know the police are there. Put me on speaker so they can hear this. There was a pause, a rustle of fabric. Okay, you're on speaker. Detective Miller is here, Mr. Vance. A deep voice boomed. This is Detective Miller. You need to tell us where you are. Taking a sick child from his home is a felony. We know about your history. We can help you, but you need to come in. Detective, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I'm not having an episode. I'm having a realization. I realized my marriage was failing, and I panicked. I took Evan to get a second opinion because I didn't trust the local care. That's not a crime. His mother is worried sick. The detective pressed. I know, and I'm sorry. I lied. I'm bringing him back. We're on our way home now, but first I need to talk to my wife privately. Take me off speaker, Morgan. Another pause. Okay, Morgan said. The sound quality changed as she lifted the phone to her ear. Hunter, please listen to me closely. I cut her off, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I bought the hospital, Morgan. What? She sounded confused. St. Mary's. I bought it this morning. I own the servers. I own the security footage. And I own the records of every single off-the-books surgery Julian has performed there in the last 5 years. I know about the senator. Silence. Dead silence. I could hear her breathing hitch. I haven't released the files yet, I continued, and I won't. If you do exactly what I say, Hunter, she whimpered. He made me. Save it. I don't care about your excuses. I care about the deal. I want my family back, Morgan. I want to fix this. I'm willing to pay Julian off to make him disappear. I'm willing to buy the senator a kidney from somewhere else. But we need to meet tonight. Meet my mountain estate. Just the three of us. You, me, and Julian. We settle this like adults. We settle the debts. I'll bring the checkbook. You bring the truth. But the police? Get rid of them. Tell them I'm coming home. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. If I see one cop car, I release the files to the press and the senator goes down. And if the senator goes down, do you think he'll let you live? It was a gamble. I was betting on her fear of the senator outweighing her fear of me. Okay, she whispered. Okay, tonight 8 p.m. But is Evan okay? He's fine, I said, looking at the empty seat next to me. Evan was still at the boathouse with Kendra, fighting for his life. He's perfect. See you tonight. I hung up. Phase 1 complete. I had baited the trap. Now I needed to make sure the trap had teeth. I drove the SUV up the winding roads toward my mountain estate. It was a fortress of glass and steel, perched on a cliff edge, isolated, unreachable, without an invitation. I hadn't been there in 2 years. I parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up. The house was cold, silent. I went to the basement. It wasn't a typical basement. It was a reinforced panic room, armory. I walked past the gun racks. I didn't need guns tonight. I needed something else. I walked to the medical supply storage. I pulled out a gurney. I pulled out a tray of surgical instruments. Scalpels, retractors, heists. I set up the room. I draped the sterile sheets. I adjusted the overhead surgical lights until they cast a blinding white circle on the empty table. I wasn't a doctor, but I knew anatomy. I knew how to take things apart. My phone buzzed again. Protocol ghost. Target update. Senator Thorne is on the move, heading to a private airfield. Julian is with him. My blood ran cold. They weren't waiting for tonight. They were running. I dialed the number for the airfield's tower. I own the aviation company that serviced that field. Ground control. A voice answered. This is Hunter Vance. Authorization code Alpha 9-0. Ground all flights. Mechanical failure on the runway. Park a fuel truck across the tarmac if you have to. Nothing takes off. Copy that, Mr. Advance. Runway is closed. I hung up. I had them boxed in. I sent a text to Julian's number. Hunter, the runway is closed. Julian, the senator can't fly, and neither can you. I have the files. Come to the mountain. Bring the kidney or I send the files to the FBI in 60 minutes. I watched the dots bubble on the screen. He was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Panic. Julian, we have a deal. Hunter, we have a deal. $10 million and clean passage tonight. Julian, we're coming. I put the phone down on the surgical tray next to the scalpel. The metal clanked against metal. They were coming. I walked upstairs to the main living area. I opened a bottle of vintage red wine, a 1982 Petrus. I poured 3 glasses. I placed them on the dining table. Then I went to the smart home control panel on the wall. I accessed the security protocols. System lockdown mode trigger voice command code Scalpel. I tested the shutters. Massive steel blast shields descended over the floor-to-ceiling windows with a heavy mechanical thrum, turning the glass house into a steel cage. Perfect, I said. I raised the shutters again. I wanted them to see the view. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to think they were walking into a negotiation, not an execution. I checked my watch. 2 p.m., 6 hours until showtime. I needed one more guest. I went back to the basement and opened a different case. This one held a high-frequency signal jammer, the kind we used in the Middle East to stop remote detonations. I set it to a specific frequency, one that would kill all cellular signals within a 1 radius, but leave my hardwired landline active. When they drove up that mountain, they would be leaving the world behind. No calls to the senator, no calls to the police, just them, me, and the truth. I sat down in the leather armchair at the head of the table facing the door. I placed my hands on the table. They were steady. I closed my eyes and pictured Evan's face. I pictured the jagged scar. I pictured the shriveled kidney on the ultrasound. An eye for an eye is too easy, I whispered to the empty room. I'm going to take your hope first. The waiting was the hardest part. In the field, you learn to embrace the boredom, because it usually precedes the chaos. But sitting in my silent mountainous estate, watching the sun dip lower, painting the sky in blood-orange hues, I felt a vibration under my skin. It was the hum of adrenaline kept in check by sheer will. At 7:45 p.m., the perimeter sensors tripped. Vehicle approaching Gate 1. I pulled up the feed on my tablet. Julian's Porsche Can, black and sleek, wounded its way up the switchbacks. Morgan was in the passenger seat. I could see her silhouette, stiff and upright. Julian was driving fast, aggressive, right on time, I murmured. I stood up and smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit. I wasn't wearing body armor. I wasn't carrying a weapon. The house was the weapon. I walked to the massive front doors made of reinforced oak and steel, and unlocked them. I left them slightly ajar, an invitation. I returned to the dining room where the 3 glasses of wine sat breathing. I poured myself a glass of water instead. I needed a clear head. I heard the car crunch over the gravel driveway. The engine cut. Car doors slammed. 1, then 2. He better have the check. I heard Julian's voice muffled through the heavy walls. If this is a setup, he's alone, Morgan's voice replied shaky. I checked the security app, the cameras show only him. She checked the app one allowed her to check. She didn't check the thermal sensors in the basement. The front door creaked open. Hunter, Morgan called out. We're here, dining room, I replied, not raising my voice. They walked in. They looked rich. Julian was wearing a tailored suit, no tie, trying for casual confidence, but radiating tension. Morgan wore a black dress, pearls, and a look of terrified exhaustion. Where's the boy? Julian asked immediately, scanning the room. Safe? I said, gesturing to the chairs opposite me. Sit. They hesitated. Sit, I repeated. It wasn't a request. They sat. Morgan refused to look me in the eye. Julian stared me down, his jaw tight. Let's cut the theatrics, Vance, Julian said, leaning forward. You have files, I have connections. You want to make this go away? Fine. We make it go away. Where's the money? It's coming, I said, picking up the wine bottle. A wire transfer is queued. $10 million clears at midnight. Midnight? Julian scoffed. We need to be on a plane by 10. Banking regulations. I lied smoothly. Large sums trigger flags. I had to route it through 3 shell companies to keep your name off it. You want clean money, you wait. I poured wine into their glasses. The rich red liquid swirled. Drink, I said. It's a 82. A good year. Morgan reached for the glass with a trembling hand. She needed the courage. She took a large gulp. Julian didn't touch his. I don't drink with blackmailers. Funny, I said, leaning back. I don't drink with butchers, but here we are. Julian's eyes narrowed. Careful, soldier. You're punching above your weight class. The senator, Senator Thorne, I interrupted. Yes, I know. End-stage renal failure. Type O negative. Desperate men do desperate things, don't they? Julian froze. The mention of the name took the wind out of his sails. He realized I wasn't guessing. I knew, you know. I continued swirling my water. I was looking at Evan's medical file today, the one you forged. You listed the cause of surgery as traumatic rupture, but you billed the insurance for appendectomy to cover the operating room costs. Sloppy, Julian. Very sloppy. It's just paperwork. Julian dismissed. It doesn't prove anything. It proves fraud, I said. But that's the least of your worries. Tell me, Julian, what's the going rate for a kidney these days? $200,000. Julian didn't answer. He looked at Morgan. You told him. I didn't. Morgan cried. I swear she didn't have to. I said, I read your emails. Asleep Holdings. Grade A viability. I pulled a small remote from my pocket. It wasn't for the TV. It was for the projector I had hidden in the ceiling. A beam of light cut through the dim room, hitting the white wall behind me. The image appeared. The receipt, the invoice, the chat logs. Morgan gasped. Julian went pale. I have everything, I said softly. Every text, every transaction, every lie. Julian stood up, knocking his chair back. This meeting is over. We're leaving. I don't think so, I said. Julian reached into his jacket. I knew what he was reaching for. A snub-nosed revolver, a coward's gun. Sit down, Julian, I said, not moving. Before you do something, you'll regret. You think I'm scared of you? Julian sneered, pulling the gun out. He pointed it at my chest. You're just a washed-up vet with a checkbook. Give me the transfer codes, Hunter. Now, Morgan screamed. Julian! No! That wasn't the plan. The plan changed when he projected my felony on the wall. Julian shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. Codes! Now I looked at the gun. Then I looked at him. Alexa, I said clearly. Protocol locked down. The house groaned. Suddenly the massive steel shutters slammed down over every window in the room, with a deafening clank, clang, clang. The sound was like a prison door slamming shut. The ambient light vanished, leaving only the dim dining room chandelier. Julian spun around, startled by the noise. What the hell is that? Blast shields, I explained calmly. Reinforced titanium alloy, bulletproof, soundproof, and inescapable. I tapped the table. And by the way, I added, I jammed the cell signals 5 minutes ago. Your phone is a brick. Julian pulled out his phone. No service. He looked at Morgan's phone. No service. Panic started to set in. Real panic. He looked at the steel walls. He looked at the gun in his hand. He realized it was useless against the house itself. Open the doors, he screamed, aiming the gun at me again. His hand was shaking now. I can't, I said. The system is on a timer. It doesn't open until sunrise or until I give the override code. Give me the code. No, Julian pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. I didn't flinch. The bullet hit the invisible plexiglass shield that had risen from the floor in front of my end of the table the moment I said lock down. It was a feature I installed for high-risk negotiations. The bullet flattened against the glass and fell onto the table, spinning like a coin. Julian stared at the bullet. He stared at the glass. You really didn't do your research, I said, standing up slowly. I walked around the glass shield. Julian backed away, stumbling into the sideboard. He dropped the gun. It clattered on the hardwood. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need it. I walked toward him. He looked small now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a prey animal realizing the cage door is locked. You took my son's kidney, I said, my voice low and vibrating with rage. You cut him open like a piece of meat. You left him to rot. I stopped inches from his face. I could smell his fear. It smelled like sour sweat. I'm not going to kill you, Julian, I said. Death is too fast. I'm going to make you understand exactly what you did. I turned to Morgan. She was sobbing into her hands, curled up in her chair. And you, I said, you sold your own flesh and blood for a bracelet. You're not a mother, you're an incubator. I grabbed Julian by the lapels of his expensive suit and slammed him against the steel shutter. He groaned, the air leaving his lungs. Welcome to my operating theater, I whispered. I hit a button on the wall panel. The dining table began to lower into the floor, revealing the elevator shaft to the basement. We're going down, I said. I have some equipment I want to show you. The elevator descent was silent, save for Morgan's jagged breathing and the soft hum of the hydraulics. Julian was pinned against the mirrored wall, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat, searching for a way out that didn't exist. He had lost his gun, his phone, and his composure. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. We weren't in a finished basement with a pool table and a home theater. We were in a concrete bunker. The air was cool, filtered, and smelled of ozone and gun oil. I shoved Julian forward. Move. He stumbled into the room, his Italian loafers skidding on the polished concrete. He looked up and his knees nearly buckled. In the center of the room, bathed in the harsh white glow of the surgical lights, was the gurney I had prepared. Next to it, the stainless steel tray gleamed with instruments. Scalpels, forceps, retractors, a bone saw. What is this? Julian whispered, his voice cracking. Hunter, this is insanity. You can't do this. You did it, I said, walking to the tray and picking up a number 10 scalpel. The blade caught the light. You did it in a bedroom, with a carpet full of dust mites. At least I had the decency to provide a sterile environment. Morgan collapsed to her knees, clutching the hem of my pants. Hunter, please stop. I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll give you full custody. Just let us go. I looked down at her. You gave up custody the moment you let him cut Evan open. I gently but firmly pulled my leg away. Get up, sit in the chair. I pointed to a heavy metal chair bolted to the floor in the corner. If you move, if you scream, I turn off the ventilation, and we all suffocate in here. Understand? She nodded frantically, scrambling to the chair and curling into a ball. I turned back to Julian. He was backing away, his hands held up. Hunter, listen to me, he stammered, sweat pouring down his face. The kidney, it's gone. It's with the courier, but I can get it back. I can make a call. You can't make a call, I reminded him. No signal. Then let me leave. I'll drive to the courier. I'll stop the delivery. Liar, I said calmly. You drive straight to the airport or the police. I advanced on him. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him onto the gurney. He fought, thrashing and kicking, but he was a soft-handed surgeon who played golf on weekends. I was a man who had been trained to neutralize threats with my bare hands. I pinned his arm, twisting it behind his back until he shrieked in pain, then slapped a zip tie onto his wrist, securing it to the gurney rail. I did the same with the other hand, then his ankles. In 30 seconds, he was spread-eagled, helpless under the bright lights. He was hyperventilating. Please don't kill me. I have money. I have $3 million in offshore accounts. Take it all. I picked up the remote for the wall projector again. I don't want your money, Julian, I said. I have plenty of my own. I clicked the button. The image on the wall changed. It was no longer the invoice. It was a live stream. Julian squinted at the wall. What? What is that? That, I said, pointing with the scalpel, is the lobby of the Medical Board of Licensing. The camera showed a chaotic scene. Police officers were seizing boxes of files. people were being handcuffed, and that I clicked the button again showing a second feed. Is your clinic? The windows were smashed. A sign hung on the door closed by order of the state. I didn't just buy the hospital, Julian, I said, leaning over him. I leaked your entire patient history to the press an hour ago. Every botched Botox injection, every cut rate implant, every illegal prescription. Your career isn't just over, it's incinerated. Julian stared at the screen, his mouth open. No, he whispered. My life. Your life. I laughed. A harsh barking sound. That's just your job. We haven't gotten to your life yet. I walked to the tray and picked up a syringe. I flicked it with my finger. What's in that? Julian screamed, struggling against the restraints. Is that poison, Hunter? Don't. It's not poison, I said. It's a paralytic. Suenylcholine. It paralyzes the muscles. You won't be able to move. You won't be able to scream, but you'll be awake. You'll feel everything. I wasn't actually going to use it. It was saline, but he didn't know that. No, no, no. He thrashed so hard the gurney shook. Relax, I said. This is exactly what you did to Evan. Only you didn't wait for the anesthesia to kick in fully, did you? That's why he was thrashing. That's why the incision is jagged. I leaned close to his ear. Did he cry for me, Julian? Did he ask for his dad while you were cutting him? Julian squeezed his eyes shut, sobbing. Yes, he cried. He wanted you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The confession hung in the air like a physical blow. I pulled the syringe back. I didn't inject him. I set it down. That's all I needed to hear, I said quietly. I picked up the scalpel again. Now I said, I'm going to make you a deal. A trade. I placed the cold steel of the blade against his shirt right over his kidney. He stopped breathing. I won't cut you, I said, if you tell me exactly where the courier is meeting the senator. GPS coordinates. Vehicle description. Time. I don't know. He stammered. I pressed the blade down. It sliced through the fine fabric of his shirt and pricked the skin. A tiny bead of blood bloomed. Don't lie to me, Julian, I roared, losing my composure for the first time. My son is dying. Where is it? Runway 4, he screamed. Private Hangar B. The courier is a blue van. Midnight. The senator is flying out at midnight with the organ. Midnight. I checked the wall clock. 10:45 p.m. I had an hour and 15 minutes. I pulled the scalpel away. Thank you, I said. I didn't untie him. Morgan, I called out without turning around. She whimpered from the chair. Watch him, I ordered. If he moves, scream. If you try to untie him, I'll know, and then I really will come back and finish the surgery. I walked to the weapon rack on the wall. I bypassed the handguns. I grabbed a suppressed MP5 submachine gun and 2 extra magazines. I grabbed a flashbang grenade. I grabbed a set of body armor. I strapped the vest on over my suit. I checked the chamber of the MP5. Click, clack. Where are you going? Morgan asked, her voice trembling. To get a refund, I said. I walked to the elevator. Hunter, Julian yelled, straining against the zip ties. You can't go there. The senator has a private security detail. Blackwater, they'll kill you. I turned back one last time. The lights reflected off my eyes, making them look like glass. They can try, I said. I hit the button for the garage. As the doors closed, I heard Julian screaming my name, begging me not to leave him tied to the table. I didn't care. He was safe. He was alive, which was more than he gave my son. I reached the garage, jumped into my truck, not the SUV, the off-road beast with the winch and the ram bar, and hit the remote for the garage door. I roared out into the night, tires spinning on the gravel. Runway 4, Hangar B. I had 75 minutes to intercept a federal senator, neutralize a mercenary squad, and recover a cooler containing the only thing that could save my son's life. Protocol Ghost was over. Protocol War had just begun. The drive to the private airfield was a blur of high beams and white-knuckled rage. I wasn't Hunter Vance, the billionaire CEO, anymore. I was Sergeant Vance, 1st Special Forces Group, the man who had been deployed to places that didn't officially exist to extract high V-value targets. Tonight, the target wasn't a terrorist leader or a rogue spy. It was a cooler, a red igloo cooler with a white lid. I checked the dashboard clock. 11:20 p.m. I had 40 minutes before Senator Thorne's jet went wheels up. I killed the headlights a mile out from the perimeter fence. I turned off the main road and bounced across a cornfield, the truck suspension groaning as I plowed through the dry stalks. I approached the airfield from the east, the blind side near the old fuel depots. I parked the truck in the shadow of a rusted water tower. I grabbed the MP5, checked the suppressor, and slid a fresh mag into the well. I slipped the night vision goggles, NVGs, over my eyes. The world turned into a grain of green phosphor. I moved to the fence, chain link topped with razor wire. I used bolt cutters to snap the links, creating a hole just big enough to crawl through. I was inside. Hangar B was 500 yards away. It was brightly lit. A sleek Gulfstream G650 jet sat on the tarmac. Engines whining, heat shimmers distorting the air behind the turbines. Parked next to the jet were 3 black SUVs and a blue van. The courier, I saw men moving around, 6 of them. They were dressed in dark tactical gear carrying AR-15s. Julian wasn't lying. This was a private mercenary detail. Ex-military, likely professionals. They formed a perimeter around the van. A man in a suit. Senator Thorne stood by the jet stairs looking impatient. He checked his watch. I needed a distraction. I scanned the area. 50 yards to my left was a power transformer box that fed the runway lights. I raised the MP5. I adjusted for windage. I squeezed the trigger. Foot. 2 rounds slammed into the transformer. Sparks showered down like fireworks. The runway lights flickered and died, plunging the tarmac into darkness. Contact! Lights out, someone shouted. The mercenaries switched on their weapon-mounted flashlights, beams cutting through the dark like lightsabers. Defensive positions, get the senator on the bird. I moved while they were distracted. I sprinted low across the tarmac, using the parked fuel trucks as cover. I was a ghost in the green static of my NVGs. They were blinded by their own flashlights, their night vision ruined. I reached the rear of the blue van. 2 MKs were guarding the back doors. Secure the package, one yelled. He reached for the door handle. I popped up from behind the tire. Foot, double tap to the chest plate. Foot, 1 to the helmet. The first MK went down. The wind knocked out of him by the impact on his vest. He wasn't dead, but he was out of the fight for 10 seconds. The second Merc spun around. I didn't shoot. I swept his legs, driving him into the asphalt. I slammed the butt of the MP5 into his temple. He went limp. I grabbed the handle of the van doors and ripped them open. Empty. My heart stopped. I looked frantically around the interior. No cooler, just packing peanuts and straps. Looking for this, I spun around. Senator Thorne stood at the top of the jet stairs, flanked by 2 more guards. He was holding the red cooler. The lights on the jet stairs illuminated his face. He looked sick, gaunt, yellow-skinned, but his smile was triumphant. "You're too late, Mr. Vance," Thorne shouted over the whine of the engines. "Possession is 9-10 of the law." He turned and stepped into the cabin. The guards followed, pulling the stairs up behind them. "No!" I screamed. I sprinted toward the jet. The remaining mercenaries on the ground opened fire. Bullets sparked off the asphalt around my feet. I dove behind the landing gear of the jet, pinned down. The engines roared louder. The jet began to taxi. I was losing him. I looked up at the wheel well. The landing gear was still down. I had a choice. Stay here and watch my son die, or do something stupid, something suicidal. I holstered the MP5. I waited for the jet to turn, shielding me from the shooters on the ground. As the jet picked up speed, rolling past 20 knots, I broke cover. I ran alongside the massive wheel. I jumped. I grabbed the hydraulic strut of the landing gear. The metal was hot and greasy. My fingers slipped. I scrambled, hooking my legs around the thick steel piston. The jet accelerated. 50 knots, 80 knots. The wind tore at my clothes. The noise was deafening. We lifted off. The ground fell away. The mercenary cars became toys. The airfield became a postage stamp. Then the mechanical groan. The gear was retracting. I was being crushed into the wheel well. I squeezed myself into the small crawl space between the tire and the fuselage wall. It was dark, cramped, and freezing. I was inside the plane, but I was on the wrong side of the pressure hull. I had maybe 5 minutes before the altitude killed me or the cold froze my blood. I pulled out my knife. I found the maintenance hatch, a small panel used by mechanics to access the hydraulics. It led into the cargo hold. It was secured with 4 heavy screws. I jammed the tip of the knife into the first screw. I turned it. It stripped. "Come on," I roared, adrenaline surging through me. I used the knife as a pry bar. I braced my feet against the tire and pulled with everything I had. The aluminum panel bit. The screws popped one by one like gunshots. I kicked the panel in. I squeezed through the hole, tumbling into the pressurized cargo hold. It was warm, It had oxygen. I lay on the floor, gasping for air, my hands shaking. I was in. I stood up. I was in the belly of the beast. I checked my weapon. One mag left. I moved to the access ladder that led up to the main cabin. I climbed it slowly, pushing the trapdoor open just an inch. I saw the cabin cream leather seats, walnut trim. Thorne was sitting in a recliner, the cooler on the table in front of him. He had a glass of scotch in his hand. To new beginnings, he toasted the empty air. A guard stood by the cockpit door. Another sat in the rear reading a magazine. They thought they were safe at 30,000 feet. I pushed the trapdoor open and climbed out. The rear guard saw me first. He dropped his magazine, reaching for his sidearm. Gun. I didn't hesitate. I put 2 rounds in his shoulder before he cleared the holster. He went down screaming. Thorne dropped his glass. It shattered. The cockpit guard spun around, raising an AR-15. I dove behind a bulkhead as a burst of automatic fire shredded the leather seats. "Don't shoot the cooler," Thorne shrieked. "You idiot. You'll hit the kidney." The guard hesitated. That was my opening. I popped out, sighted, and fired. But the guard's weapon clattered to the floor. He grabbed his leg, collapsing. I stood up. I walked toward Thorne. He was pressed back in his seat, clutching the cooler to his chest like a lifeline. He looked terrifyingly pathetic. "Stay back," he yelled. "I'm a United States Senator. I'll have you executed for treason." "You're not a senator right now," I said, aiming the MP5 at his head. "You're a thief." I reached out and grabbed the handle of the cooler. He held on. "I need it. I'm dying." "My son is 7, I said coldly. "He hasn't even started living." I ripped the cooler from his grip. I shoved him back into the seat. "Sit down and shut up," I ordered. I walked to the cockpit door. I kicked it open. The pilots jumped. "Turn this bird around," I said, pointing the gun at the instrument panel. We can't just turn around," the captain stammered. "We have a flight plan." "Declare an emergency," I said. "Tell them you have a hostile passenger. Tell them whatever you want, but land this plane at St. Mary's Hospital helipad. Now the helipad. This is a jet. We need a runway." "Then find the closest runway to the hospital," I barked, "and have a chopper waiting or I start shooting out the avionics." The pilot nodded, pale as a sheet. He grabbed the radio. "Mayday! Mayday! Gulfstream 69er. Requesting immediate diversion." I walked back into the cabin. I sat in the seat opposite Thorne. I placed the cooler on the table between us. I put my hand on the lid. It was cool to the touch. "You know," Thorne whispered, staring at the box. I would have paid you double." "You can't buy what isn't for sale," I said. I looked out the window. The city lights were far below. Somewhere down there, Evan was waiting. I patted the cooler. "I'm coming, buddy," I whispered. "Daddy's coming home." The Gulfstream touched down at the municipal airport 20 minutes later. The tires screeched, burning rubber as the pilot stood on the brakes, using every inch of the runway. Through the window, I saw the flashing lights. Not police cars, an ambulance. My ambulance. I had radioed ahead to Kendra. She was waiting on the tarmac, flanked by 2 of my private security contractors. Before the jet even came to a full stop, I popped the emergency exit door over the wing. The slide didn't deploy. I didn't give it time. I jumped onto the wing, the red cooler strapped to my chest, and vaulted to the ground. Thorne was screaming in the doorway behind me, waving his senatorial ID at the airport security vehicles that were just now arriving. "Arrest him. That man is a terrorist." I ignored him. I sprinted toward the ambulance. "Viability," Kendra shouted as I threw the back doors open. "Ice is still solid," I panted, handing her the cooler. "It's been out of the body for less than 8 hours. We're in the window," she said, her eyes fierce. "Barely. Get in." We peeled out, sirens wailing, leaving the senator and his mercenaries to explain the bullet holes in their jet to the FAA and the FBI. We arrived at St. Mary's in record time. The hospital was in lockdown, secured by my private team. No press, no police, just us. We wheeled Evan into O1. He was barely conscious, his skin yellow, his breathing shallow. "Daddy," he whispered as we transferred him to the table. "I'm here, buddy," I said, stroking his hair. "I brought it back. We're going to put the puzzle piece back." Okay, he murmured, his eyes closing. Kendra put the mask over his face. "Count backward from 10, Evan." I watched him drift off. "Hunter, you need to scrub out," Kendra said gently. "You can't be in here." "I'm not leaving," I said. "I'm staying until the clamps are off." "Hunter, I'm staying," she nodded. "Stay out of the sterile field." I stood in the corner watching. I watched her reopen the jagged incision Julian had made. I watched her clean out the infection. I watched her prepare the kidney, my son's kidney, cleaning the vessels, checking the urine, and then the moment of truth, the anastomosis, sewing the vessels back together. It took 2 hours. Finally, Kendra released the clamps. We waited for a terrifying 10 seconds. The kidney remained pale gray, then a blush of pink spread across the tissue. It turned red, vibrant, healthy red. "We have perfusion," Kendra said, her voice thick with relief. "It's pinking up. Look there." A single drop of clear fluid appeared at the end of the urine. The kidney was working. I slumped against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I put my head in my hands and wept. Not soldier tears, father tears. 2 hours later, Evan was in the ICU stable. I walked out of the recovery room. I was exhausted, covered in grease from the landing gear, and blood from the fight. But I wasn't done. I had one loose end to tie up. I took the elevator down to the basement morgue, but I wasn't going to see a body. I opened the door to the prep room. Julian was there, still strapped to the gurney where I had left him. Morgan was sitting in the chair, asleep from exhaustion. Julian looked up. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. He had been tied there for hours, terrified, imagining every horror. "Hunter," he rasped. Is he? "He's alive," I said. The transplant was successful. Julian let out a sob of relief. Thank God. Thank God. Now, please let me go. I told you where the senator was." "I helped you, you didn't help me," I said, walking over to him. "You saved your own skin." I picked up the scalpel again. Julian flinched. "No, we had a deal. I told you everything." "We had a deal for the senator," I said, "but there's still the matter of what you took from my son. You took his innocence. You took his trust." I leaned over him, "and you took an oath. Prima noir, first do no harm." I cut the zip tie on his left hand, then his right. He sat up, rubbing his wrists, crying, thank you, Hunter. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "I know," I said. I nodded to the door. 2 large men in suits walked in. They weren't my security, they were federal agents. "Dr. Julian Ross," one of them said, holding up a badge. "FBI, we have a warrant for your arrest for organ trafficking, medical fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." Julian looked at me betrayed. "You called the feds." "I didn't call them," I said, turning to walk away. "Senator Thorne did." Julian froze. "What?" "Thorne cut a deal." I lied. "He's singing like a canary. He blamed the whole operation on you, said you blackmailed him." It wasn't true. Thorne was currently in custody, screaming for a lawyer, but Julian didn't need to know that. I wanted him to know that his world had completely collapsed. "And Morgan," Julian pointed a shaking finger at my wife. "She's part of this too." The agent looked at Morgan. She stood up, trembling. "Mrs. Vance," the agent said, "we have questions for you as well." Morgan looked at me. "Hunter, please." "I'm his mother." I looked at her. I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just absence. "You were his mother," I said. "Now you're just a witness." I walked out of the room. I walked out of the basement, out of the hospital, into the morning sun. I pulled out my phone. I dialed General Grant at the Pentagon. "It's done," I said. "Good work, Sergeant." Grant's voice was gruff. "The senator is in custody. The story is breaking on CNN right now. Billionaire exposes organ ring. You're a hero, son." "I'm not a hero," I said, watching the sunrise. "I'm just a dad." I hung up. I went back inside to sit next to my son's bed. I held his hand. He squeezed back. "Daddy," he mumbled. I still closed. "Yeah, bud. Did you get the bad guys?" I smiled, squeezing his hand tighter. "Yeah, Evan. I got them all." The peace of the recovery room was shattered by a single sound, the shattering of the lobby glass downstairs. I was dozing in the chair next to Evan's bed, my hand still holding his. I snapped awake instantly, the soldier overriding the exhausted father. My phone buzzed. It was a security alert from the team I had stationed in the lobby. Code black. Perimeter breached. Multiple hostiles. Heavy armor. "Damn it," I hissed. Senator Thorne wasn't just a politician, he was a desperate dying animal backed into a corner. I had intercepted his kidney, but I hadn't neutralized his private army. The men on the jet were just his personal detail. The cleanup crew, the ones meant to erase loose ends, had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to burn the evidence, and the evidence was my son. Kindred, I shouted into my comms earpiece. Lock down the ICU. Barricade the doors. Hunter, what's happening? Kendra's voice was tight with panic. We have company. Get Evan to the secure lift. Take him to the roof. The medevac chopper is still there. I can't move him. He's post-top. If you stay here, you're dead, I roared, checking the magazine in my MP5. Move him now. I kissed Evan's forehead. He was still groggy, blinking up at me, confused. I'll be right back, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. Just playing a game of hide and seek. I sprinted out of the room, locking the heavy magnetic doors behind me. I ran to the nurse's station and vaulted the counter, looking at the security monitors. The lobby was a war zone. 12 men in full tactical gear, gas masks, and unmarked uniforms were sweeping the floor. They were moving tactically, efficiently. These weren't street thugs. These were professionals, likely black ops, contractors hired through a shell company. They were heading for the elevators. I couldn't let them reach the 4th floor. I hit the fire alarm. The strobes began to flash and the sirens wailed. It would add chaos, confusing their comms. I ran to the stairwell. I didn't go down. I waited. I heard the heavy boots clanging on the metal stairs below. They were coming up. I pulled the pin on my last flashbang grenade. I counted to 2. I dropped it down the center gap of the stairwell. Bang! A blinding white light and a deafening concussion rocked the shaft. Screams echoed from below. Flash out! Eyes! My eyes! I didn't wait. I leaned over the railing and fired. Foot. Controlled bursts. I took down the point man. The others scrambled back, firing blindly up the shaft. Bullets pinged off the railing next to my face, sending concrete dust into my eyes. I pulled back, taking fire. 4th floor, one of them shouted. I had stalled them, but I couldn't hold the stairs forever. They would breach the elevators soon. I ran back into the hallway. I needed a choke point. The ICU had a long, sterile corridor leading to the double doors. It was a fatal funnel. I grabbed a heavy metal supply card and overturned it in the middle of the hall. Cover. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open for men stepped out, weapons raised. I opened fire. The hallway erupted in noise. Glass shattered. Drywall exploded. I dropped 2 of them instantly. The other 2 dove behind the nurse's station counter, suppressing fire. One yelled. They unleashed a hail of bullets. I huddled behind the metal card, feeling the impacts vibrate through the steel. I was pinned. I checked my ammo. Half a mag, maybe 15 rounds. Hunter. Kendra's voice crackled in my ear. We're at the roof access. The door is jammed. Shoot the lock, I yelled back. I'm a doctor, not a soldier. I don't have a gun. Use the crash axe. It's in the emergency box on the wall. Break it down. I popped up to fire a suppression burst, keeping the mercs' heads down. Suddenly, a grenade skittered across the floor toward me. A fragmentation grenade. I didn't think. I kicked the card over, creating a ramp and dove backward just as it detonated. Boom! The shock wave threw me 10 feet back. I slammed into the wall, my ears ringing, my vision blurring. Shrapnel bit into my vest and my legs. I groaned, trying to stand. My left leg gave out, shrapnel in the thigh. Through the smoke, I saw the 2 MKs advancing. They knew I was hurt. They were moving in for the kill. I raised my MP5. Click. Empty. I dropped the gun. I reached for my knife. This was it. I was going to die in a hospital hallway, but I had bought Kindra a time. The lead merc raised his rifle, aiming at my head. Goodbye, hero, he sneered. Crack. His head snapped back. He dropped like a stone. Crack. Crack. The second MC spun around, his chest erupting in red mist and collapsed. I blinked, confused. I hadn't fired. I looked down the hall toward the stairwell door. A man stood there, tall, gray hair, holding a scoped DMR rifle. He wore a crisp army dress uniform jacket over tactical pants. It was General Grant. Behind him, a dozen military police officers in riot gear swarmed into the hallway, stepping over the bodies. Secure the floor, Grant barked. Clear the rooms. He walked over to me, slinging his rifle. He looked down, his face grim but proud. You look like hell, son, he said. Took you long enough. I wheezed, clutching my bleeding leg. Grant offered me a hand and pulled me up. Traffic was a we got the call about the senator's private army moving out. Figured you might need some backup. The roof? I gasped. Evan is on the roof. My boys are already up there. Grant said the chopper is secure. Your son is safe. I leaned against the wall, sliding down again. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by searing pain. Senator Thorne, I asked. In federal custody, Grant said. He tried to run. We picked him up at the airfield. He's already trying to cut a deal, but with the evidence you uploaded, he's going to die in prison. And Julian, FBI has him. He's crying in an interrogation room." And Morgan Grant paused. He looked uncomfortable. "She's downstairs," he said. "In the back of a squad car, she asked to see you." I shook my head. "No. You sure?" "I don't know who that is," I said, closing my eyes. "My wife died a long time ago." Grant nodded. "Medic," he shouted down the hall. As the medics rushed toward me, I let myself relax for the first time in 48 hours. The siege was over. The castle had held. "We won," I whispered to the ceiling tiles. "Yeah," Grant said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You won." But as the darkness of exhaustion took me, I knew the truth. There are no winners in a war like this. There are only survivors, and I had survived. The courtroom was silent, save for the scratching of the stenographer's machine and the heavy, ragged breathing of the man in the orange jumpsuit. 6 months had passed since the siege at St. Mary's. I sat in the front row, wearing a suit that covered the scars on my leg and the deeper ones on my soul. Beside me sat Evan. He looked different now. The gray pallor was gone, replaced by the rosy cheeks of a healthy 7-year-old. He was drawing in a sketchbook, oblivious to the gravity of the room. "Dr. Julian Ross," the judge said, peering over his spectacles, "for the crimes of organ trafficking, medical malpractice, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. This court sentences you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Julian didn't scream, he didn't beg, he just slumped forward, hitting his head on the table. He was a broken man. The arrogance, the Italian suits, the God complex, it had all been stripped away, leaving only a coward. The gavel came down, crack. It sounded like a book slamming shut for good. Next came Morgan. She was led in wearing handcuffs, looking thin and fragile. Her hair, once styled to perfection, was now pulled back into a messy bun. Her eyes swept across the room until they landed on us, on Evan. She began to cry. "Evan, baby, mommy loves you." Evan glanced up from his drawing. He looked directly at her. He didn't smile. He didn't wave back. He simply stared at her with a confusion that broke something inside me. Then he turned his gaze up toward me instead. "Dad," he whispered, "can we go get ice cream now?" He didn't recognize her, not really. The woman who had held his small hand while he was drugged, who had sold pieces of him for jewelry, wasn't his mother anymore in his eyes. She was just a stranger. "Yes, buddy," I said, rising to my feet. "We can go." I didn't stay to hear her sentencing. I found out later she received 20 years. It didn't matter much to me by that point. She was already living inside a prison entirely of her own making. We walked out of the courthouse, pushing past the crowd of reporters shouting questions at us. "Mr. Vance, how does it feel to bring down a senator? Mr. Vance, is it true you're launching a foundation for organ trafficking victims?" I ignored every single one of them. I lifted Evan up and swung him onto my shoulders. He laughed, a pure, unweighted sound that meant more to me than any medal I'd ever earned. We walked toward my truck, not the armored one from before, but a new one, an ordinary family truck. I drove us out to the coast, to a small beach house I'd purchased far away from the mountain estate, far from the memories tied to that house built on lies. We sat together in the sand, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of purple and gold. "Dad?" Evan asked, tracing shapes into the sand beside him. "Yeah? Why do I have a scar?" We had told him it was from surgery to fix a stomachache. We hadn't told him the real truth yet. He was still too young to understand that the very people meant to protect him were the ones who had hurt him instead. I looked down at him, then reached back and touched the scar on my own body, the one left from the surgery years earlier when I had donated part of my liver to a fellow soldier. Scars, I realized, were just maps marking where we'd been. "It's a warrior's mark," I told him. "It means you're tough. It means you fought a dragon and won." Evan's eyes widened. "Really? A dragon? A big one?" I smiled. "But you were stronger." He beamed, puffing his chest out proudly. "I'm going to be a soldier just like you, Dad." "No," I said gently, pulling him into a hug. "You're going to be better than me. You're going to be happy." I looked out toward the horizon. The war was finally over. The enemy had been defeated, but the real victory wasn't found in prison sentences or news headlines. The real victory was the steady, rhythmic beat of my son's heart against my chest, a heart pumping blood through a kidney I had fought the entire world to get back for him. I had cut the corruption out of our lives piece by piece, like removing cancer with a scalpel. And now, finally, we could begin to heal.